It was the case that baffled every detective who walked into that hospital room. A young man beaten beyond recognition, clinging to life by a thread, wakes up from a weeks-long coma, looks his own mother dead in the eyes, and with his first raspy breath, names his attacker. It should have been the end of the investigation right there. But what he said next didn't just shock his family. It tore open a conspiracy that nobody, not even the FBI profilers, saw coming. This isn't just a story about a brutal attack. This is a story about a betrayal so deep, so twisted, that it redefined the meaning of evil for an entire small town. My name is Alex, and I cover cases that stick with you long after the screen goes dark. Today, we are diving into the story of Daniel Rojas, a 22-year-old college baseball star from Bakersfield, California, whose life changed forever on a quiet Sunday night in March. To understand the twist that shattered this case wide open, you have to go back to the beginning, back to when Daniel wasn't a victim, but just a kid with a golden arm and a smile that made everyone feel like his best friend. Daniel was the kind of guy who had it all without ever acting like it. Full-ride scholarship, a girlfriend he'd been with since sophomore year of high school named Vanessa, and a tight-knit group of childhood buddies who were more like brothers. But if you looked a little closer at his inner circle, you'd see the cracks that most people ignored. There was one friend, Marcus, who always stood a little too close to the edge. Marcus had been Daniel's best friend since the 3rd grade, but lately, things had shifted. Marcus had dropped out of college, was dealing with mounting gambling debts, and had started looking at Daniel's success not with pride, but with a poisonous envy that he masked with jokes that felt a little too sharp. Vanessa hated it. She told Daniel multiple times that Marcus gave her a bad feeling, that his energy was dark. But Daniel was loyal to a fault. He'd just laugh it off and say, "That's just Marcus being Marcus." On the night of the attack, Daniel had gone out to a local sports bar with Marcus and a couple of other friends to watch a UFC fight. It was a normal night. Wing platters, cheap beer, loud arguments about who tapped out too early. Surveillance footage from the parking lot shows Daniel and Marcus leaving together around midnight, getting into Daniel's silver F-150. What happened between that parking lot and the deserted oil field road where Daniel was found 4 hours later remained a complete mystery. A passing trucker saw a body lying in a ditch, face down in the dirt, so swollen and bloody that he initially thought it was a dead animal. Daniel's wallet was still in his pocket. His watch was still on his wrist. This wasn't a robbery. This was pure, unadulterated rage. The baseball bat used to cave in his skull was lying next to him, wiped clean of prints. For 16 days, Daniel lay in a medically induced coma. The doctors weren't sure if he'd ever wake up, and if he did, they warned the family he might be a vegetable. His mother, Elena, never left his side. She sat in that vinyl chair holding his bandaged hand, whispering prayers in Spanish, refusing to believe that her boy was gone. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, while a nurse was adjusting his IV, Daniel's eyelids fluttered. Elena dropped her rosary. She stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor like a scream. Daniel's eyes opened, cloudy and confused, scanning the room in absolute terror. He didn't know where he was. He didn't know what year it was. But he knew one thing with terrifying clarity. He started thrashing against the restraints, the heart monitor spiking into a frantic beeping rhythm. Elena grabbed his face, trying to calm him down, telling him he was safe, that he was in a hospital. And then Daniel spoke. His voice was a dry, broken whisper, cracking from the trauma of the breathing tube that had just been removed. But the words were unmistakable. He said a name. He didn't say Marcus. The detectives who had been working the case for 2 weeks had already zeroed in on Marcus. They had the motive, the jealousy, the last person to see him alive. They were just waiting for Daniel to wake up so they could lock Marcus away for attempted murder. But when Elena leaned in close, her tears dropping onto his bruised cheeks, the name Daniel choked out didn't just confuse her. It froze the blood in her veins. He said, "Vanessa." The room went silent, except for the steady beep of the monitor. Elena thought she misheard him. She asked him again, "Honey, who did this to you? Who hit you?" Daniel's eyes, filled with a horror that goes beyond physical pain, locked onto his mother's. He swallowed hard, the effort causing him visible agony. And he said it again, stronger this time, laced with a sadness so heavy it could crush you. It was Vanessa. She was the one holding the bat. The detective standing outside the door dropped his coffee cup. Every theory they had built, every hour of surveillance they had watched, every interview they had conducted, it all collapsed in a single sentence. The loving girlfriend, the high school sweetheart, who had been on the local news crying and begging for the attacker to come forward, the girl who had been sitting in that very waiting room, knitting a scarf for his recovery, was the monster who left him for dead. But the nightmare, the real twist that no one saw coming, was just getting started. Because when the police rushed to detain Vanessa, expecting to find a panicked girl ready to confess, they found something far more sinister. And back in that hospital room, Daniel wasn't done talking. As his mother stood there shattered, he grabbed her wrist with the little strength he had and whispered a warning that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. He said, "Mom, it wasn't just her. There was someone else in the shadows. Someone I couldn't see. And they told her to swing harder. This wasn't just a jealous rage. This was a premeditated execution attempt with a third player, a phantom who was still out there, watching, waiting to finish the job." Now, you're probably wondering what the police found when they kicked down Vanessa's door and who the mysterious third person in the shadows really was. That story is even darker than what you've heard so far, and it's coming in part 2, which I'm already working on right now. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the conclusion of Daniel's story, because the evidence they found on Vanessa's phone literally made the lead investigator vomit. Let me know your theories in the comments below. Do you think Marcus was actually the mastermind hiding in the shadows? Or is there someone else entirely who wanted this star athlete erased from the earth? I read every comment, and some of you are already getting very, very warm. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. But it was the third figure that nobody had accounted for. The shadow. The voice in the dark that Daniel heard whispering those 5 chilling words. Make sure he doesn't get up. After Daniel gave his initial statement, the doctors sedated him again. The trauma to his brain was still severe, and they worried the stress of the memory would trigger a stroke. But before the medication pulled him back under, he gave the detectives one last fragment, a detail so specific it made the lead investigator, Detective Ramirez, break out in goosebumps. Daniel said he didn't see the third person's face. It was too dark, the only light coming from the distant oil derrick flames flickering against the night sky. But he remembered a smell. Not cologne, not sweat. Something clean, clinical, almost like the disinfectant they use in a hospital. And he remembered the shoes. White sneakers, spotless, not a scuff on them, standing on the dirt road where Vanessa stood crying and holding the bat. Whoever orchestrated this didn't get their hands dirty. They just gave the order and watched. When the police raided Vanessa's apartment, they expected to find a sobbing, remorseful girl ready to confess under pressure. Instead, they found a locked iPhone in a drawer, hidden under a stack of handwritten letters. Vanessa had deleted her text messages, wiped her social media DMs, but she forgot about the cloud backup. And what the forensic techs pulled from that backup didn't just solve the case. It destroyed the entire narrative of a love story gone wrong. There were hundreds of messages between Vanessa and a contact saved only as R. Not Marcus, someone else. The messages started 6 months before the attack. Casual at first, then increasingly intimate, then terrifyingly businesslike. Is it done yet? Not yet. Soon. Don't back out now. You know what happens if you do. The police traced R to a burner phone, but the cell tower pings placed that phone at an address that made every cop in the room look at each other with their mouths hanging open. It wasn't some criminal hideout. It was the physical therapy clinic where Daniel had been receiving treatment for a rotator cuff injury. And the phone belonged to Dr. Adrian Cross, Daniel's 38-year-old physical therapist, the man who had been hired to keep Daniel's arm in major league condition, the man who had keys to Daniel's apartment, access to his schedule, and apparently, access to his girlfriend. Detectives discovered that Adrian and Vanessa had been having a secret affair for nearly a year, but it wasn't just lust. Adrian had groomed Vanessa, isolated her from her friends, convinced her that Daniel was a threat to their future together. He was a master manipulator, A narcissist who saw Daniel not as a patient, but as an obstacle to possessing Vanessa completely. The messages painted a horrifying picture. Adrian never planned to swing the bat himself. He was too smart for that. Too careful. He manipulated Vanessa into believing that if Daniel died, they could finally be together, that the insurance payout from his athletic policy would set them up for life. He literally brainwashed her into becoming a killer. But here is the detail that still haunts everyone who worked this case. When they arrested Adrian at his clinic, he was wearing a white lab coat and spotless white sneakers. And in his pocket, they found a small bottle of hospital-grade disinfectant. He obsessively sanitized his hands, his phone, his surroundings. The smell that Daniel remembered in that ditch, the smell of something clean in the midst of all that blood and dirt, was Adrian. Standing there, watching, making sure the job was finished. He didn't want Daniel's blood on his hands figuratively, and he made sure it wasn't there literally either. Vanessa broke down completely in the interrogation room, not out of guilt at first, but out of fear. She was terrified of Adrian, even in custody. She told the detectives that on the night of the attack, she called Adrian crying, saying she couldn't go through with it. He showed up anyway. He walked her to that oil field, handed her the bat, and whispered in her ear that if she didn't finish it, he would kill her entire family. She believed him, and when Daniel collapsed after the first few blows, she froze. That's when she heard Adrian's voice from the darkness. "Make sure he doesn't get up." She swung 2 more times, then vomited on the spot and ran to his car. They left Daniel for dead. But Daniel didn't die, and that became Adrian's worst nightmare. The trial was a media circus. Adrian Cross pleaded not guilty, of course. His defense team tried to pin everything on Vanessa, painting her as a scorned, unstable woman who acted alone. But the digital evidence, the cell tower data, and most powerfully Daniel's own testimony from the witness stand, obliterated that narrative. When Daniel looked at Adrian and said, "I recognize your shoes, and I recognize your cruelty," the jury was visibly shaken. Adrian was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Vanessa, given her psychological manipulation and eventual cooperation, received a reduced sentence, but she will carry the weight of those 2 swings for the rest of her life. Daniel's recovery was nothing short of miraculous. It took 3 years, 7 surgeries, and a titanium plate in his skull, but he walked again. He even threw a baseball again, not professionally, but to a group of kids at a youth camp he now volunteers at. When asked in an interview if he forgave Vanessa, he sat in silence for a long moment, then said something I will never forget. He said, "Forgiveness is a heavy word, but I understand what it means to be manipulated by someone you trust." Adrian broke her before he ever handed her that bat. He broke us both. The difference is, I woke up, she's still trying to. The case of Daniel Rojas isn't just about a brutal attack. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the most dangerous predators don't hide in dark alleys. They hide behind medical degrees, behind reassuring smiles, behind the illusion of care. They infiltrate your life, learn your vulnerabilities, and then weaponize the people you love against you. Adrian Cross could have been anyone's doctor, anyone's therapist, anyone's trusted confidant. And that is the horror that keeps me up at night. Thank you for sticking with this story all the way to the end. If this case hit you as hard as it hit me, please take a second to like this video. It really helps more people see these stories that need to be told. And subscribe if you haven't already, because there are so many more cases out there hidden in the shadows, waiting for someone to turn on the light. Leave a comment below. I want to know, do you think Vanessa deserved her reduced sentence, or should she be sitting in the same cell as Adrian right now? I read every single comment, and the discussions you all have in this community are honestly one of the best parts of doing this. Take care of each other out there. Trust your gut when something feels off, and I'll see you in the next one.